And on this week's In Focus session, we will be talking about why you need to stop believing the thinking you have about yourself. Because the thinking that you have about yourself is the only thing that is holding you back from doing things that you want to do and having more possibilities and having more opportunities in your life. Because what a lot of people don't talk about, right, with thinking is a very simple thing, is that we experience the world solely through our own thinking. And this thinking that we have is very personal to every individual because we make things personal to us with our own thinking. So we view the world from this kind of inside out perspective, whereas I have a thought, I react to that thought, and the experience and the feeling that I have is then created. So, for example, if someone says something to me, I have a thought that says, I don't like what this person said to me. So now I react to that thought by saying, oh, I can't believe they said that to me, how rude. So my experience becomes one of anger, frustration, annoyance. And that's how I experience that situation. And that is happening continually throughout our lives. We're always reacting to the thinking that we have. And this goes down like on so many levels, like it gets so deep, right? In that we have these stories that we've created about ourselves, which are only our own creation. And we've created them. We're the author of those stories. And we continue to believe the stories that we have made up. And those stories are what dictate a lot of the way that we show up in our lives. And what I mean by that is that these stories that we have, that we've created about ourselves, that we've made personal to us, are the things that may prevent us or stop us or hold us back from creating more and doing more and experiencing more and having more opportunities and possibilities in our life. Was if you don't believe that thinking, then that falls away. The holding yourself back falls away. And if you allow yourself to stop believing the thinking that you have about yourself, this really happens. And I've seen this in my own life in many different areas. I was having a conversation the other day. I went on a coaching retreat, a day-long coaching retreat. And we were talking about the coach who was hosting the event was talking about how he, used to be very depressed and anxious, and he'd put himself in a mental health facility for like a few weeks or months, I think it was. And he was talking about his experience and what changed for him after that. And I was relating to a lot of what he was saying. And, a lot of you guys know that I've spoken about, when I was very depressed in my late teens to mid 20s and was really not having a great experience of life. And so many people, when I speak to them and I tell them my story, the first thing they say is, well, how did you get past that? How did you stop being depressed? And I used to always say, well, I started going to the gym and I started making sure I was going to bed at a good time, and I wasn't, sleeping more than 10 hours because I'd sleep 12, 14, 15, 16 hours sometimes on the weekends. I started eating healthier, I started meditating, I started reading this, I started listening to that, and I was telling them all of these things that I was doing externally. But actually, what shifted for me, now that I really recognize it, the thing that shifted for me was simply that I stopped believing the story about me being someone who was depressed. Because the story I had about someone who was depressed was someone who ate crap food, who didn't work out, who slept for long hours on the weekends, who didn't enjoy going to work, who didn't enjoy being in large groups of people, who would only want to go out if I was getting really drunk. That this was the story that I had about myself as someone who was depressed. When I stopped believing this story, everything changed for me. The shift came not in the stuff that I was doing, but the shift came in the way that I was showing up and the way that I was being in the world. All of a sudden, I went from being someone who didn't work out to who didn't take care of their diet and ate a lot of junk food and drank a lot of fizzy drinks, who did all of this stuff, to someone who started to take care of my health, who started to clean up my diet, who started to meditate, who started to do all of these things. But it wasn't because of those things that my experience of life changed. It was because the internal me is what changed, because I stopped believing that story. And another example that I have of this is, many of you guys know, right, at the start of 2020, pre-lockdown, pre-pandemic, I was traveling around South America for 2 months. And this isn't this isn't really a story that I've told a lot, because I've never really thought about it beyond this point. But I had a conversation the other day, and this story came into my mind, and I saw it from a different perspective. So basically what happened was, I was in Colombia on a beach with some Dutch guys that I'd met. And we were there for a few days. And one of the days we were there was like really big waves, like the really rough sea. And there was like red flags up, like don't go in the sea, like it's not really safe to swim, etc., etc. And we were just chilling on this beach. And we were just sitting around chatting. And then all of a sudden there was like this noise, like in the distance, like it sounded like a scream. So we've kind of like stopped, turned around, looking around the beach, couldn't really see anything, and carried on our conversation. And then a minute or so later, it happened again. There was another scream, a bit louder this time. Looking around, no one seemed to be reacting. Nothing was happening. So we were like, okay, this is a bit strange. And then it happened a third time. So I've stopped and I'm like, this isn't right. Like something's going on here. Like I'm looking around, like no one's really reacting. Everyone's sort of doing the same thing. There wasn't like a lifeguard or anything. And I've looked out into the sea, and you could see like a head bobbing around and these arms waving about. And something happened to me, right? And I say this because what really happened is something left me. And what left me is the story that I have. And again, many of you guys know this. The story that I have about being scared of swimming in the sea. I don't like to go in the sea if I can't touch the bottom. If I get to a point where I'm in the sea and I can't touch the bottom, I start to panic, because I have a story about being scared of the sea and what that means to me, etc., etc. In this moment, in Colombia, on this beach, when I heard this screaming and saw this person splashing about in the water, struggling, that story left me. That story didn't exist to me anymore. So what happened there was, I looked out, I looked around, and I thought, is anyone helping? No. Is there a lifeguard? No. Can I swim? Yes. Can I help? Yes. And I literally took my sunglasses off, threw them in the sand, and I just ran straight towards the sea to get in, to swim to this person, to help them. And I just got straight in the sea. I didn't think once, twice, nothing about this idea of being scared of open water and not liking to swim in the sea and all of this. Because in that moment, that story didn't matter. The most important thing that mattered was to help this person. So I got in the sea and I started swimming towards him. And I looked to my right as I was swimming, and I saw another guy coming up behind me whether he'd seen me react or he reacted at the same time, I don't know. And we sort of looked at each other and gave each other a knowing nod. We swam out to this lady, probably like, I don't know, I'd probably want to say like 40, 50 meters out. I'm not even sure. And the waves are really big, really rough. It was really hard to swim against them, because they were like splashing us back and they were, crashing over us. But we got to her and we grabbed her, and she was visibly like, obviously like traumatized by what was happening, but she was also physically tired, because it was hard work trying to stay afloat in such rough water. And she was like out of breath, and she was like hanging on to us. And again, at no point did I think, oh my God, I'm so far out right now, I can't touch the bottom, like this is so dangerous. What if a squid grabs us, or a shark attacks, or something like that? None of those thoughts, which normally come to me with this story I have about being scared of the sea, came to me, because that story didn't matter. That story didn't exist to me. All that mattered was helping this person. So we grabbed this lady. We had her sort of holding on to us while we were swimming back. And it was really tough. Like, I can see why she was struggling, right? Because it was really tough to swim against the current, because we're trying to now swim back to shore. The current's pulling us back in. And plus we had someone hanging on to us, like almost like an extra weight to carry. And we were swimming back, and then a third guy came out and sort of met us halfway back and helped us get this lady to the shore, and we managed to save her. And the reason I'm telling this story is not because I want to sound like a hero or it's like an ego thing, but I'm telling you this story because what happened to me on that day, in that moment, is the story that I have about myself, this thinking that I've always believed about myself of not being comfortable swimming in the sea if I can't feel the bottom, completely left me. I didn't take it seriously anymore, because there was something more important to be done, which was clear to me, to save the person in need. And that was the only thing that mattered. And that's what I did. Like, it just seems so obvious. And this is what happens when you stop believing the thinking that you have about yourself, and you stop taking this thinking you have about yourself so seriously. What happens is, what is actually true for you in that moment, what is actually the next action or the next step or the next thing to happen, becomes available to you, because your wisdom speaks to you. And in that moment, my wisdom spoke to me and said, this person needs help. I can help. Let's go and help her. And after that, it seemed obvious for me to just get in and swim to her and try and help her. I could have been putting myself in danger. Again, that didn't cross my mind because the thinking wasn't there. And I'm not going to lie and say to you that I've never been scared about swimming in the sea again, because when I was away in France a few weeks ago, which was probably the next time I was in the sea, that thinking was still there, because in that moment I was taking that thinking seriously, that if I couldn't feel the bottom of the sea, I was scared, in danger, whatever. But what's really important is to know what is happening. And the more that you can understand that what is always happening for you is that you have a thought, you react to that thought, and that creates your experience and your reality in that moment. The more you can understand that that is always happening in your life, the easier it will be for these stories that you have and this thinking that you have about yourself to fall away. And sometimes it might be really extreme, like it was for me in that story in Colombia. Sometimes it will take a little bit more time. But over time, the more that you can see that you're only ever reacting to your own thinking about a situation, the more these stories that you have about yourself will fall away, because you will see that they aren't true. As much as the story about me being scared about the sea isn't true, although it can seem and appear very real at times that is a true thing, it's quite clearly not, because when that story didn't matter, I was able to do something really amazing and really incredible for someone else, because that story didn't matter to me. So therefore it can't be true that I'm scared of the sea, because I wouldn't have been able to do that. And I think that's really important. So I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear what you learn or what you have got from this episode, because I think this is a really powerful notion of you're only ever reacting to the thinking you have. So to do so, hit me up on Instagram at I am Alex Manzi. Message me with your learning from this story, from this episode. I would love to hear it. And I would love to expand on that with you and have a conversation around it, because I think it's really important that we start to explore these ideas together. So please hit me up on Instagram with your learning from this episode at I am Alex Manzi. I thank you for listening, and I'll see you for the next episode.